All right, so we are diving into the story of Representative Sylvester Turner,
Oh,
a Texas Democrat who sadly passed away
oh wow.
just 2 months into his term.
Oh my goodness.
But here's where it gets interesting. He was filling the seat of another representative who had also died in office not that long before Sheila Jackson Lee.
Wow.
Yeah, talk about a whirlwind for this district.
Yeah, it really is. It makes you think about how unpredictable life can be, to have two representatives from the same seat pass away during their terms, it's practically unheard of. And what's even more fascinating is that both Turner and Lee had these long, impactful careers in public service before they even got to Congress.
It's kind of wild, right? So let's rewind for a second and unpack Rep. Turner's journey.
Okay.
He was born and raised in Houston, and he went from poverty to becoming a major player in Texas politics, like a real rags to riches story.
Absolutely. Almost 30 years in the Texas House of Representatives from 1989 to 2016.
Wow.
And then he served as Houston's mayor until 2024. So it's clear that serving his community was a core part of who he was.
Yeah, talk about dedication.
Yeah.
And then when Rep. Sheila Jackson Lee passed away in July 2024,
Right.
he stepped up to fill her seat in the U.S. House of Representatives.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost poetic in a way that they both ended up passing away while serving in Congress.
Yeah, it really highlights the fragility of life and how these events can reshape the political landscape in these unexpected ways.
Totally. Okay, this detail really struck me. Turner's last post on X, formerly Twitter, right before his death.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he posted, "Don't mess with Medicaid," just minutes before President Trump was set to address Congress.
Oh, interesting.
What do you make of that?
Well, it adds a layer of intrigue for sure. It seems like a pretty direct critique of President Trump's policies at the time, especially with the timing. This is a period of intense debate about healthcare policy, and Turner was clearly not afraid to take a stand.
Yeah, it definitely makes you wonder what was going through his mind in those final moments, and it speaks volumes about his commitment to his constituents.
Absolutely.
What's interesting is that even with that very public stance, he was still deeply respected by both Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah, that's something that stood out to me, too. You rarely see that kind of cross-party respect these days. In fact, the Texas House of Representatives voted unanimously to allow him to lie in honor at the state capitol,
Wow.
which is a pretty rare gesture and shows how much he was admired.
I'm curious, when you look at all the tributes that poured in, what struck you as the most revealing about his character?
Well, you had everyone from Rep. Randy Weber, a Texas Republican, who called him a devoted public servant, to Rep. Pete Aguilar, chair of the House Democratic Caucus, emphasizing how impactful Turner's short time in Congress really was.
Yeah.
Even Rep. Terrace Sewell, a fellow member of the Congressional Black Caucus, talked about how Turner not only filled Sheila Jackson Lee's shoes, but managed to create his own powerful legacy.
It's really touching to see that kind of unity in the face of loss. It makes you realize that sometimes there are these figures who just transcend partisan divides and simply command respect.
Absolutely. And what struck me even more were the personal stories from those who knew him well. It's one thing to hear praise from colleagues, but the heartfelt words from people like Houston Mayor John Whitmire really paint a picture of Turner as a man of the people.
I was particularly moved by Whitmire's statement about how Turner, despite achieving such great things, never forgot his roots. He called it a devastating loss for the city. Do you think that connection to his upbringing shaped his approach to leadership?
Absolutely. I think it's a key part of his story. You see it in his long-standing friendship with Rodney Ellis, a Harris County commissioner who knew Turner since they were teenagers.
Yeah.
They call themselves good troublemakers, working together to make a real difference in their community.
Good troublemakers.
Yeah.
I love that. It sounds like a testament to his lifelong passion for social justice.
It really does. And then you have his family statement calling him the consummate public servant, while also emphasizing his role as a loving father, grandfather, and relative. It reminds us that beyond the politics, there's a human being with deep connections and a family grieving his loss.
Yeah, it's such a poignant reminder that these figures that we see as larger than life are also real people with families and loved ones.
Exactly. And that their impact extends far beyond just the political realm.
That's a good point. When you take a step back and look at his career, what stands out to you as his most significant accomplishments or contributions?
Well, you can't talk about Sylvester Turner without mentioning his impact on Houston. Almost 30 years in the Texas House, followed by 2 terms as mayor. That kind of dedication to a single city is pretty remarkable. And he didn't just occupy those positions, he really got things done.
Okay, so let's talk specifics. What were some of the key initiatives or policies he was known for? I know he was a big advocate for affordable housing, especially after Hurricane Harvey hit.
Exactly. After Harvey devastated the city, he really spearheaded those efforts to rebuild and make sure that people displaced by the storm had safe and affordable places to live. His approach was lauded by many as innovative and compassionate. He understood that a safe, stable home is the foundation for everything else.
That makes sense. I also remember hearing about his work on criminal justice reform. Wasn't that a big focus for him?
Yeah, it was. He was really passionate about making the system more just and equitable. He pushed for bail reform to address the issue of people being stuck in jail simply because they couldn't afford to pay. And he championed programs to help formerly incarcerated individuals reintegrate into society. Reducing recidivism was a big priority for him.
So it sounds like he was really looking out for those who were often overlooked or marginalized.
You see that thread throughout his career. He fought for better healthcare access, pushed for economic development in underserved areas, and always seemed to have a heart for those who needed a helping hand.
So a real mix of pragmatism and compassion. It's interesting to think about how he navigated the political landscape to achieve those goals. We talked earlier about how he was respected by both Democrats and Republicans. How did he manage that in such a polarized political climate? It seems almost impossible these days.
Right? It's definitely not easy, but he seemed to have a knack for it. From everything I've read, he was a master of building bridges and finding common ground. He listened to different perspectives, sought out compromise, but never wavered on his core values.
Okay, but wasn't there some pushback on his pension reform plan? How did he maintain that bridge-building approach when faced with criticism, even from within his own party?
Yeah, you're right. The pension reform issue was definitely a challenge. He made some tough decisions to address Houston's budget shortfall, and those decisions weren't popular with everyone. Some employee unions and retirees felt like they were bearing the brunt of the reforms, and there was definitely some tension there.
So how did he navigate that? It seems like walking that tightrope between fiscal responsibility and protecting those who rely on those benefits would be incredibly difficult.
He really leaned into transparency and communication. He held town halls, met with stakeholders, and clearly explained the reasoning behind his decisions. He acknowledged the short-term pain, but emphasized that the reforms were essential to avoid a much larger crisis down the road. It wasn't about scoring political points. It was about doing what he believed was best for the city's long-term health.
It seems like that commitment to open communication was a defining characteristic of his leadership style.
Absolutely. He was very accessible to his constituents, whether it was through community meetings, his social media presence, or just being willing to meet with people one-on-one. He understood that to truly represent people, you have to listen to them.
So more than just a policymaker, he was a public servant in the truest sense, which brings us back to the unfortunate circumstances of his passing. What do you think his sudden death so soon after Rep. Lee's means for his district and the political landscape as a whole? It must be a huge blow.
Yeah, it's definitely a big loss. On a practical level, it creates another void in representation for the district. They've lost two experienced leaders in such a short time, which will impact their ability to advocate for their needs in Congress. There's going to have to be another special election, and it'll be interesting to see who steps up and how they carry forward the legacy of both Lee and Turner.
It's a tough situation for sure. Do you see any broader implications for the political landscape given the unique circumstances of their deaths? It feels like it could shake things up quite a bit.
It certainly highlights the fragility of life and how unpredictable politics can be. It's a reminder to appreciate the time we have with those who are making a difference and underscores the importance of having a strong system for succession in place to ensure continuity of representation.
That's an important point. It also makes you appreciate the dedication and resilience of those who choose to serve in public office. They're under constant pressure and scrutiny, and it's not an easy path.
Absolutely. And I think Rep. Turner's life and career provide an inspiring example of what it truly means to be a public servant. He came from humble beginnings, dedicated his life to serving others, and built a powerful legacy for his community and his state.
A legacy that's sure to be remembered for a long time. But beyond the political achievements and policy debates, what do you think is the most important takeaway from Rep. Turner's story? What resonates with you the most?
For me, it's the power of compassion and a genuine desire to make a difference. Those qualities shone through in everything he did, from his early days as a community activist to his time as mayor and congressman. He never forgot where he came from and always fought for those who needed a voice.
That's a powerful message, and it makes you wonder what he might have achieved if he'd had more time. It's hard not to think about the what ifs.
Yeah, it's natural to think that way, but it's also a reminder that we can't take anything for granted. Every moment counts, And how we choose to spend our time ultimately determines the impact we make.
So let's bring this back to our listener. Why should they care about the story of a Texas congressman they might not have even heard of before? What makes this deep dive relevant to them?
Well, I think Turner's story has valuable lessons that go beyond geography or political affiliation. It's a story about resilience, rising above challenges to achieve great things. It highlights the importance of public service and using your platform to help others. And it's a testament to the power of compassion and finding common ground, even in a divided world.
Yeah, it's a story that reminds us that even when things feel tough, we can still make a positive impact.
Exactly. And you don't have to be a politician or hold a position of power to do that. Sometimes the most meaningful contributions come from simple acts of kindness, standing up for what you believe in, or lending a helping hand.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the life and legacy of Rep. Sylvester Turner, let's remember that his story isn't just about one man. It's about the values he embodied and the ripple effect he had on others.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping the world around us.
Beautifully said. And on that note, that's it for our look at the life and legacy of Rep. Sylvester Turner. We hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep making a difference in your own corner of the world.